Morning, good evening to all of you that are joining us on this session today, focusing on why gender perspectives are key when it comes to education, particularly when it comes to education to the rule of law. I also want to welcome you, as today is also a special event and a special day. It's the International Women's Day. But I also would like to stress right from the beginning that gender is not about girls and women. Gender perspectives matter and affect all of us, boys, girls, men and women, every single day. My name is Bianca Kopp from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And before introducing to you the three panelists that are here with us today, I would like to give you a short background on what we as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime are doing on education and on education with regard to gender perspectives. Many of you may know what we as UNIC are doing. Our mandate is to make the world safer from drugs, crime and terrorism. And you might wonder now, but what is UNIC doing with regard to education? And the answer is a simple one. We have realized a few years ago that while working with member states is of course key in supporting the capacity of member states to strengthen crime prevention and the rule of law is key, it's not enough. We need to do more. We need to strengthen the prevention side of our work. And how can we do that better than with working with educators? So UNODC's Education for Justice initiative was born a few years ago. It actually was born and started during the last Crime Congress that took place in 2015 in Doha, Qatar. At that time, in Doha, Qatar, people met face to face, and the member states adopted a political declaration called Doha Declaration. And this Doha Declaration was the first political declaration highlighting the key role education has and educators have in strengthening crime prevention and the rule of law worldwide. And this was the kickstart of the UNODC journey, of the Education for Justice journey. And we have come a long way. We have worked since 2016 with thousands of educators and have reached more than 1.5 million children and students through our educational materials. But let me reiterate, we as UNODC, we are not experts in education. And this is why we are working with the experts of education. We're working with academics, we're working with teachers from the primary and the secondary level, and we of course also work with UNESCO. And we have developed material to strengthen teaching in an innovative way on rule of law, on the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly focusing on topics related to the Sustainable Development Goal 16 on peace, justice and strong institutions. And when we have started developing these tools, we realized how important it is to include gender perspectives in our material, to really empower the educators, to integrate gender teaching, to integrate gender-sensitive education in the classroom. So what have we done? At the primary level, I'll give you a short example. We have developed with the NGO an online game called Chuka, Break the Silence. This is an online game for boys and girls to learn about gender-based violence in a very innovative way. But of course, we have also developed, together with our experts, with the educators, training manuals and also teacher guides for teachers to help them and to support them teaching on issues related to ethics, teaching on values, teaching on acceptance, etc., and always include a gender perspective in this teaching. At the secondary level, we work directly with youth, but also with teachers. With the youth, we empower young female students to join our hackathons for justice. We empower them to join our Model United Nations. And we also empower the teachers when they discuss issues related to terrorism, trafficking and cybercrime about these issues by including a gender perspective. And at the higher education level, at the tertiary level, we have been working with academics and have developed more than 115 peer-reviewed models that help lecturers teaching at the university level on topics such as counterterrorism, cybercrime, crime prevention, criminal justice, and corruption. And we have developed more than 8 specific models that focus on gender perspectives. For instance, teaching on corruption and the gender nexus, teaching on the role gender can have when it comes to criminal justice, but also teaching on cybercrime and focus on gender-specific cybercrimes. So this is in a nutshell what we at the UNODC are doing to not only strengthen teaching on the rule of law worldwide, but to ensure that there is a gender perspective when teaching so. Because our aim is to empower the next generation, your students, that will become the next generation of business women and businessmen, that will become the next generation of political leaders. And they need not only to understand issues related to the rule of law, but they need to understand why it's key to have a gender perspective when adopting policies, when applying new laws. And this is why I'm very honored to be here today with 3 amazing panelists. Not only panelists, but I would even go a step further. Who is here with us today? They are amazing gender champions with whom we within the Education for Justice initiative have worked in the past. All of them have inspired us, and this is why we invited them for today's session. So allow me first to introduce the 3 panelists that we here with us today. Allow me to welcome first Melissa Thiering from Qatar University. Hello, Melissa. Melissa is an attorney and clinical assistant professor at the College of Law at Qatar University. Melissa was the founding director and the creator of her college's exam, and she has taught advocacy, ethics, and professionalism at the Qatari Law College since 2011. Melissa's research focuses on SDG 5, gender equality, and SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. But she's also looking into the question how culture affects local legal professions, legal education, and professional responsibility notions. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from her later on that. Melissa was also the first, and this has to be mentioned, she was also among the first female faculty members at the College of Law. And she has been a very prominent voice, encouraging women to join Qatar's legal profession. She hosted in 2018 Qatar's first Women in Law conference and has been invited to join the Education for Justice network later on. She has contributed to the development of our tools, and she has been named in 2019 to be an Education for Justice champion. I also would like to present to you our second panelist, Jakob Sule. Hello, Jakob. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you,
Jakob is the executive director of the I Read to Live initiative Nigeria, a non-profit organization promoting quality education and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. He is the convener of the Human Rights Coffee Shop, or the Human Rights Cafe, a virtual collaborative conversation set up to empower new generations of leaders to know and promote the advocacy of citizen rights and dignity of all persons. Jakob is specialized in law, education policies, and human rights issues, and he is currently serving as a 100 ambassador, resident expert on the SDGs, and the Teach SDG ambassador. I'm very honored to have Jakob here with us on this important panel. And last but not least, and I'm happy to see her now joining because she had some technical problems and we were not sure if Dr. Rima Diab will join us. So hello, Rima. I would like to welcome Ms. Rima Diab. Dr. Rima Diab is the founder of the Galaxy Organization for Technology, Jordan, and she belongs to the world's top 100 tech women influencers. Rima currently holds the position of founder and CEO of Galaxy for Information Technology, and she's also working as a consultant for Tesla and the World Bank. The US has ranked Rima, as I said before, to belong to the 100 tech women influencers of the world. Rima is a contributor to the World Economic Forum, and she writes regular columns for international economic websites. So we have a very mixed panel. What unites them all is that all of them are gender champions, and this is why they have been invited to join us and to discuss with all of you why it is so important to include gender approaches, gender perspective when teaching on the rule of law. May I Again, welcome all of you. And I would say, let's kickstart today's discussion with a first round by further introducing yourself to our audience and by telling our audience about the first time in your life when you realized that gender matters. Melissa, may I ask you to start and share your story when you realized that gender matters?
For sure. And thank you for having me here. And I'm so excited to be with all of my fellow presenters. So again, I'm Melissa, and I am a clinical assistant professor at Qatar University College of Law. And I've been teaching there for 10 years now. And prior to that, I was an attorney in California. The first time I realized that gender matters was when I was here in Qatar. It was about 9 years ago, and my university we were going for an accreditation. And we had some consultants come and do a big assessment, and they were going college by college telling all of us where, our college pass or fail on this proposed accreditation. And I'm sitting in a room with all of my faculty and the consultant, and how our faculty meetings go, they're in Arabic and English. So we all have headsets. Well, those of us who are not bilingual, we have headsets to listen to what everyone is saying. And the consultant said, so we would not pass because we didn't have diversity of faculty. And there was a brief pause while the translator interpreted that. And after that, the room erupted in laughter, just like belly laughing. And I looked down because that's what I do when I'm trying to have the headphones and the interpreter. And I hear the interpreter interpret comments like, women can't teach, and that if we hire female faculty, they're just going to get pregnant and leave. And I hear that female students prefer to have male professors. And I'm looking down, and I'm turning red, and I'm getting angry, and I'm getting sad, and I'm having that that feeling that I need to say something. And I said, okay, I need to look up. And I look up, and what hit me was immediately I was the only woman in the room. In fact, I had not even noticed in an entire 2 years of working there. I did not realize that I was one of the only female faculty members in the college until that moment. And that was my wake-up call, because that was not okay. And what was happening was not okay. And before that, I had been focused so much on skills and building legal skills that I had not realized how much gender it must be part of the legal skills that we are adding. So that was my moment. That was my big wake-up call. And ever since then, it's been my mission to take as many female teaching assistants as I can, to mentor any students that want to be undergraduate teaching assistants, to mentor colleagues who are young and just coming back from their PhDs, coming back from their LLM, and they've been hired as junior faculty, and just to try and keep also in all the hiring meetings and the faculty meetings, reminding them constantly, gender. We need to be thinking about gender in this school. So that's my moment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing that. And I know how you continue the journey, and I'm sure you will describe afterwards, what you did to address that, not only besides, yourself, the actions that you yourself did, but also with your students. So thank you so much for sharing this awakening moment, I would say, that yes, there still needs to be done a lot to achieve gender equality, and that teaching and also legal teaching matters, and we need to include gender perspectives in that. And with this, may I ask the next panelist, Jacob, may I hand over to you? Can you share with us what was your first time when you realized that gender matters? What was your experience?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bianca, and greetings to you all from Nigeria. First, I'd like to wish every woman around the world on this occasion of International Women's Day congratulations for the giant strides and advocacy for gender equality and equity around the world. Having said that, for me, my first personal encounter when it comes to issues of women or gender equality was as far back as the year 2015, when I returned to university to enroll for a second degree in law. In that environment in which I found myself as a law student, I did a survey to underscore the reason why we have a larger percentage of male child in school as regards the normal percentage of the boys and girls. And during the discovery, I found that most of the girl child were enrolled as laborers on their parents' farmland. What that means is that in a family of four, and you have two boys and two girls, the two boys are being sent to school to enroll as students, while the other two girls are taken to their farmlands with their parents to work as laborers. What that means in Africa is that an average African man believes that you do not necessarily have to invest so much on the female child, because even if after investing so much on the female child, this same female child goes back into a different family and bears a different man's name. So for me, I saw that as a mistake. We cannot continue to change like this particular gender because XY's gender is like this. So when I noticed the challenge of enrolling girls as laborers on their farmland, I started an initiative called the I Read to Live initiative. And the purpose of that initiative was to see how we can advocate for the right of children to education, regardless of your gender, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of your name and the language you speak or your religion. We started advocating for equal rights to quality education in that community. And I can tell you for a fact that 5 years down the line, we have recorded appreciable increase in the numbers of girls that have been enrolled in school and for those that have graduated. Now, there's an African parable that says that a woman would always end up in the kitchen of a man. For me, I found that parable as derogatory. So for me, as an individual, having established a non-profit organization, what was to ensure that ladies are the ones championing the role of gender equality. And currently, as I speak now, we have a team lead on gender equality who is being supported by a male, so as to ensure that we don't just bring this perspective that no, the girls or the boys should have their own individual divergence. So for me, having had that close interaction with gender issues in Nigeria, ever since then, I've been consistently working on advocating for access to quality education, regardless of your sex, your gender, the color of your skin, or the language in which you even speak. And then for me, I have seen education as a leveler in which we can use to achieve development in our countries, regardless of how you want to put it. So from in the perspective of gender equality, having had this first-hand experience, I have consistently worked hard to see how we can ensure that we bridge the gap between the male child and the female child by eliminating any issue of bias. And in doing that, we have consistently worked with partners, donors, institutions, and state governments across states in Nigeria to ensure that we make parents and parents, guardians, and traditional rulers understand the value that every child carries, regardless of the fact that you're a male or you're a female. We must ensure that everybody has access to education and quality and equitable education that is unhindered. So that's my first perspective for having like a close interaction with gender issues in Nigeria. Thank you.
Jacob, thank you so much. I couldn't agree with you more. You said education is an enabler, and thank you for sharing your perspective and your experience when you were made aware that gender matters and that we'll have to address this. Now, over to our third panelist, Rima, would you also like to answer the question, what was, first of all, introducing yourself and what telling us about the first time in your life when you realized that gender matters and how this felt for you?
You know, I'm coming from the Middle East, and it is very important to focus about the gender equality here in Jordan. Especially, I'm working in the technology field. So, and the participation of women, it is very, very rare to be in the C level or to manage a high level position. So my first thing was when I was assigned as a managing director for a big company in telecom industry. So I was promoted to this position, and I was faced a problem that it was assigned for the first lady in the history of the company. And as it is a telecom company and international company, it was not easy thing that you will be the managing director for the MENA region. So it was for 1 year communicated between me and the HR why you don't want a woman. If it is not me, it will be another woman. So what is the problem? So I was going in a very long debate to justify why this role is always for the men. I'm fitting the qualification. I'm a good woman. You can put me and hire me on this position. So it was the first time to assign a woman in the telecom industry here in Jordan and to take this role for the MENA region. So this is the first, really, was the first time I was in my professional life that I facing this. And the other thing that when I was assigned to this position, I have opened doors for me to be in the telecom industry and in the tech industry. I was a click in my mind that why I didn't think that gender is more important for the tech and how to enhance to put girls more in the STEM education. So I started an initiative in Jordan, especially Jordan, that hosting a lot of refugees. And the refugees here in Jordan, to be honest with you, they doesn't have the luxury to access to the technology. So I started an initiative to learn the tech skills for the refugees for free. Then I came with my organization Galaxy, and I founded in 2015 in parallel with my position as a managing director for a telecom company. So it was really important for me to see the impact for the girls, to enhance them to be more in the tech field, more in the skills that they needed to work in the future skills. So after that, I was really nominated to be as a tech woman in the USA. I have ranked in Dubai as a best woman that having this of impact in their community. But what I have learned that women are more important to enhance them in the tech industry, especially in the Middle East. Especially we have this kind of culture, they have this kind of really old mentality that resistant of the woman. They shape the woman that she is in the kitchen, or maybe she's married, or she has a lot of things to do, but not to work and not to be on the professional level, especially in the tech industry. So my initiative and Galaxy organization, we are the first NGO in the region that just dedicated to empowering women through technology. So we enhance these women, especially in the rural area and the refugees camps, to enhance their skills in technology, how to have a sustainable education in the STEM field, and how to take her sustained income. After COVID-19, we have succeeded that because we know that every woman, we teach her a very programming skills or coding skills. It was matter for her to work online. So with COVID-19, we have this kind of achievement and recognition from all around the people and our partners that we are working. Yes, we need Galaxy to empower women and to teach women coding and programming, which was a very long journey, almost 5 years, just to convince people that remote working is the future, because it was resistant. But now we have, alhamdulillah, succeed on this. And this is what we want to have it. The gender equality is very important to have enhanced women participation in the STEM industry. It's more important. Even I will just finalize with something that the World Bank have this kind of statistic that 12% of the women are in the level of sea level in the world. It is not the issue of Jordan or the issue of Qatar or the issue of Saudi Arabia. It's all around the world that women participation in the STEM education or in the STEM field, it is the lowest in the region. or in the lowest in the world. So we have to work together as umbrella under UNODC or under the umbrella of all our partners, just to enhance gender equality for women, especially in technology, and to fill the gap between women and men. And happy International Day for you all.
Thank you, Rima. That was very inspiring, and thank you for sharing your story with us, and also actually providing some of the answers for my second questions. So allow me to just reformulate the second question so that also our audience is aware what I want to ask next. So actually, I want to hear now from the panelists, and I think we have all heard now where they are coming from, and it's clear to all of us that no matter where you are, we all constantly expect issues related to gender that either stop us doing things the way we are doing things, or that have an impact. So the three examples shared by the panelists show exactly what we need to counter and what we need to fight. And I think now I would like to hear from my panelists what you are doing specifically to promote gender-sensitive approaches, and why do you think do we need to empower children and youth to understand, but also to take on gender perspectives? Rima, you have partly answered the questions already when responding to my first question, but would you like to add something and maybe giving an example how you promote gender-sensitive approaches in your company?
Okay, actually we have a strategic plan, and I have a vision from since time ago that the technology is the future. That's why I always said that I create my own galaxy. So my own galaxy, it is a non-profit organization to empower women through technology, and we are focusing on other pillars like youth and kids. But first of all, we have this kind of issue in Jordan, especially in the region, that we have a higher education for the woman, but the lowest participation in the labor market. So Galaxy came just to fill the gap between the education system and the market needs, and how to enhance women more to be in the labor market. So later on that we have this kind of a lot of initiative all around the cities in Jordan, and we have this kind of collaboration between our partners like FCA, like UNODC, like the United Nations in general, the World Bank, that we have this kind of our partners to put our strategy to be implemented on the ground, because there is a resistance between putting women and the remote work and to have their gig economy participation, especially in the MENA region. One of the things that we have it here in Jordan, that Galaxy made an awareness session about the STEM education, and we went to all the girls' schools, and we make an hackathons for them, and we encouraging them to take the tech skills and then make them to participate with a global hackathon with all around the world. And especially we are more focusing on the SDGs goals, and how to make this kind of problems solve the SDGs and solve the community needs. So this is the first thing, that we have to raise awareness about the tech and the STEM education for girls, and this is what we are already did in the schools. The other thing that we have to highlight for the role model, because when we were in the schools, we make a little survey for the girls that what is your role model. To be honest with you, I was shocked that there is no role model as we want, as a scientist or as an astronaut or as a tech woman. So all of them, they're sport ladies or something like this, or fashionista now. so it was very, very, very rare to find someone that she need a role model. So this is what we have did an initiative to highlight a role model about the tech ladies more, or the entrepreneur ladies. So this is mainly what we have to fill it and to enhance these ladies from a young generation to follow her passion in the STEM education or in the technology, especially to find a role model to be followed. The other thing that I think it's very important to highlight about the education and that we have collaborated in 2019 before COVID-19 with the World Bank and the UNODC about the justice for the initiative Justice for All. So this was mainly to work from the young generation and to enhance their skills for the future. The other thing that we need here in Jordan, I think that we have to start from very early stages from the primary school and to make the curriculum to be more flexible and more adapted for our booming technology, because now with COVID-19 all the people are working on e-learning. But what is kind of e-learning you are working with the kids or with the teachers and with their parents? So you need to empower all of these kind of a triangle to have this kind of skills to the parents and how to make it for their kids and how to make it for the teachers available. So we did a lot of initiative regarding this, and this is what we are doing, that we have a vision for Galaxy and we have a mission to follow and to have this kind of impact for all the kids and the girls especially.
Thank you, Rima. That is inspiring indeed. And I liked what you say about the need for role models. Yes, I agree. We need role models.
Yes.
Melissa, may I ask you to share with you your story? What are you specifically doing to promote gender-sensitive approaches? And why you think that we need to empower? I mean, you have already highlighted that you're working with your students, but please share a little bit more details with us.
Yes. So I combine education for justice, integrity and ethics modules and other modules with professional responsibility, legal professional responsibility concepts. And then I also combine that with United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which is the resolution for women, peace, and security. And I use that and all those legal concepts to advance women in law and in the judiciary and in international diplomacy in Qatar. And it's pretty simple. As Hillary Clinton said in a recent October 2020 op-ed in The Atlantic, women's rights are meaningless unless women feel empowered to claim them. And so that sums up essentially what I've been doing in Qatar for the past 10 years. I've been trying to build my law students' confidence and capacity so that they feel empowered to enter and lead Qatar's legal profession, because once women enter the legal profession, they are able to interpret laws, they're able to help others, and they change the laws. So it sounds complicated, but it's not. And actually, Katie, I can show my slides if that would be awesome, if that would be okay. I start with the Education for Justice modules. And I've tried a lot of different educational materials out here, but I really think that these are broad enough that you can use them for anything. So here's an example. If you look at what the integrity and ethics modules I'm looking at, there's so many different kinds. And I can do the next slide, Katie. And then so I take these modules, you'll see that, and I incorporate them in a bunch of different ways. So some of this, I don't just do gender module, I also do ethics, and I try and get them to, we can start with debating ethics, and we can start with just basic. So most of my students, they're very familiar with Islamic ethics, but they're not familiar with the three most famous Western philosophical theories. So we can debate that just to get them to kind of think differently and to debate something outside of what they know, and right and wrong. And the next slide, Katie. And then once we've kind of warmed up after a couple of weeks on this right and wrong and ethics, then we move into equality, because we're already starting to debate the fun stuff. So then when it gets to the more nitty-gritty stuff that can be a little bit difficult, we've already had a warm up. And so this is United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. And so I will bring this up. We will study this law. We'll look at how this urges member states to increase their participation of women and inclusion of women, but it doesn't require. So then, you know, from a legal perspective, we'll be talking about international law and, you know, what does this mean, and how we as lawyers, how can we you know, should we be changing this? What should we do internally in Qatar? How do we monitor progress? All of that kind of stuff. We'll look at the Constitution. We'll look at how this overlaps. We'll look at different laws out here. We'll look at His Highness, the Emir, some of his speeches. We'll analyze them. We'll look at Her Highness, Sheikh Hamoza, the Queen Mother, who's an SDG advocate and been a huge advocate for Qatari women. So we'll look at some of their speeches. We'll look at some of the initiatives the state of Qatar has looked at. And then we'll just kind of debate about whether they're working or not, because there's also a huge gap between where the state is trying to take us and where society kind of feels that we should go. But I do want to show you, I can go to the next slide, the biggest thing that has been happening with incorporating education justice and bringing these materials in is this has really led to increased student activism. And I just wanted to show some of these photos to show you that these materials do work, and incorporating gender into education does make change. So these are photos of some of my students teaching other students. In several of my classes, I made it a project that I would teach them something from E4J, and then they'd have to take what I taught and adapt it and make it theirs and go teach local high school or middle school students. And that's like, we call it street law, but I think a lot of other types of education have those kinds of experiences. And my students loved it. No matter how shy or nervous or worried they were, they all came back and they had more self-confidence. They had better public speaking ability. Sometimes that was their first public speaking ability and they were so scared, but when they were with the younger students, they understood how important it was to do. And then some of my students even had changed career goals, which is important for me because I'm a former defense attorney. So many of my students said they'll never go to court. They're going to work for the government. They're never going to be an attorney. And then after public speaking, they actually said, well, maybe it's not going to be so bad. So that's huge. And then all of these partnerships helped me secure more student activities and more connections with Taimun Qatar, the Hague International Model UN. It helped us get enough students interested so we could participate in a student competition. And you see up there, it says cybercrimes against women. Some of my students even took the materials further, and they then, in their competition, created this video and they approached cybercrimes against women from an Islamic perspective. And they talked about women's rights and what you could do and how you can go to the police and when to go to the police. And it was fabulous. And then they did it from an Islamic perspective so that we were actually able to circulate that video and have even more community activism. And then again, I can go to the next slide. Thank you. These debates and these conversations helped empower my students so that then when I had more possible activities for them to do, they felt comfortable being peer mentors. And so they then went and were oral advocacy coaches with the Model UN, the Model CCPCJ, which is for high school students, and they've even actually gone to the Taimun Middle School competition, and they've helped mentor those students. And I can do the next slide, KB. And all of this has led to new research. And it's not just research for me, but some of this has led, it's also a colleague from Oxford who's a behavioral economist. She studied me, she studied my classes, and she was testing whether these materials modified students' ethical attitudes and frame sets, and they did. And that was so incredible. Then we were able to push for even new educational courses in my college, and my uni let me do it. So we were able to establish a prisoner rehabilitation project, which focused a lot on women in prison and mothers in prison. And then possibly the thing I'm most proud of is this Voices of Qatari Women in Law and International Diplomacy. And it's a lot like what Rima was saying with the need for role models. This was an oral history project and an interactive research exhibit, and it had the goal to increase the historical documentation regarding women's leadership in Qatari society and contradict popular stereotypes regarding Gulf women by providing more history of their societal participation in leadership. And then, of course, we wanted to inspire youth and get them to learn the history of their role models. We did interviews with all of the women we highlighted. So, and we can do the next slide, Katie, which is the last one, I think. And this exhibit toured Doha prior to the pandemic. And what was so incredible is that my students staffed the exhibit. So my students at every event I went to, my students were the staff, and they brought their friends and they brought their families and they brought anyone that they could, their cousins, and they were explaining the importance of the exhibit, the importance of the women who we highlighted, the importance of the research behind it, and it is completely because of their enthusiasm and their support that actually we had more than 1,000 visitors of this exhibit, and we received more than 300 positive response cards and pledges, which was just a phenomenal result. And unfortunately, we had the pandemic, which shut it down. But I look forward, when life gets back to normal, hopefully, that this will keep touring and keep inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. This was very inspirational indeed. Thank you for sharing the pictures that show, what an impact it has on your students to teach about those topics. And you refer to a very important study that I also want to mention again for our audience. We, under the Education for Justice initiative, we're working together with the University of Oxford to do an impact study to see how teaching on values, how teaching on ethics and integrity make an impact and change the attitude. So Melissa is just one of our E4J champions that has participated on this study. And while this study obviously will continue, because to see a change in impact, for this you need several years. The first results that we got from research and service undertaken in different parts of the world is already a very optimistic and positive one. And I think work undertaken at the higher education level also shows how important it is, how important it is to constantly empower again the students to take an action and to rethink their approaches. So thank you, Melissa, for being a role model to your students. And with this, I would like to invite now Jacob. Jacob, can you also please share with us how you are promoting gender-sensitive approaches? And since we have heard so many now about female students, maybe you could also tell us from your experience why it's also important to have gender role models for boys and men. And with this, over to you, Jacob.
Thank you, Bianca. First, I want to say that being here today amidst women is one of a testimony to show my concern and interest in promoting gender equality. Being the only male panelist amidst two doctors who are experts in advocating for the rights of women is a testimony to the fact that, yes, regardless of where we find ourselves, we must always have a balanced conversation on advocating for the rights of women and boys to accessing education. So for me, yes, how are we doing this at I Read to Live initiative? From the name of my organization, which says I Read to Live, it means that regardless of your gender, if you do not read constantly, you cannot continue to live in existence of things in which we have around you. So one thing in which we're doing first is to see that, to let people understand that human rights is devoid of gender, whether you're a male or you're a female. In as much as you're a human, you have a right that must be respected and protected. So for us at I Read, the first thing we're doing is to ensure that we host literacy events. These events are hosted annually for the boys and girls to help them sharpen their literary skills, let them understand the concept of education, the essence of living, let them learn the ethos of good living, integrity skills, let them be honest, and then let them understand the role of law and the reasons why they should understand that nobody is above the law. So through our literacy events, we host these events annually. We go to schools. We have boys and girls within the ages of 6 to 14 who participate in these various events to understand the workings of education and all that. Having talked about literacy, we also engage both boys and girls on sports. And I think sometimes in 2014, we had a literacy event that had to do with the boys and girls. The boys were involved in track events and then football activities and all that. The essence of that event was to see how we can build the team spirit of the boys and the girls. We understand, yes, that children are from different backgrounds. Fingers are not equal. Those from the wealthy homes and those from, the less exposed and wealthy homes. So for us, through the event, we try to bring together these children, boys and girls, to understand the essence of team building and working together. The fact that, yes, some of us attended an all-boys secondary school does not mean that we should disregard and disrespect our fellow colleagues who are females or those who have not been privileged to attend each of these schools. So for us, through sporting activities, we try to build student competencies and also to ensure that we have a balanced representation of both the boys and girls in events trying to advocate for gender equity. And also looking at the target of the SDGs, we have worked on having a makerspace in Nigeria. That makerspace have a focus on the boys and girls. And like I've always said over time, you cannot have a community that is free from oppression if you just focus on just one particular gender. So for me, through the makerspace, we have been able to empower our boys and girls with skills that are transferable, skills in which they might not even learn like from the four walls of the classroom. But then if you empower these girls and boys, they can be able to get into the society and then replicate the skills and then to see how we can have a fairer and a much more peaceful society. Yes, and then talking about access to the E4J tools, yes, we've tried as much as possible to engage secondary school students to understand the essence of being honest. Yes, they say charity begins at home, but then we have tried as a non-profit organization to let students, boys and girls, understand the role of honesty. Regardless of what the situation might be honest and truthful. The worst you can have is maybe you'll be punished for an offense, but then we try to make them understand that honesty is the best policy in which you can give to your children. And then the issue of integrity, we don't joke with integrity. Having a law background, we try to understand to make our students understand that yes, you cannot become someone in life if you don't have a good integrity. Yes, people might feel that what another, but then if you do not have integrity that speaks well for you, then I think you need to go back home and rework on yourself. So for us, we try to instill the discipline of integrity in our boys and girls, particularly for those who are seeking leadership position. You cannot lead if you do not have a good integrity. So for me and I Read to Live initiative, we do not joke with the principle of integrity amongst our boys and girls. And then away from I Read to Live initiative, I've gone further to establish the Human Rights Cafe. The Human Rights Cafe is a platform for young people across board in Nigeria, where we teach them about their rights as citizens, to understand their rights, to promote, to protect, and to advocate for their rights. Yes, you must have listened to very disturbing news from Nigeria, maybe today, police brutality, rape, and all of that. So for us at the Human Rights Cafe, we've set up a platform to see how we can get closer to our students in primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions that, yes, Mr. A has a right. You must respect social person's rights so that your own right too will be protected. And also, in doing this, we have helped young people to identify particular issues, for them to speak. And when speaking, they should be able to reflect and be part of global conversations. Because the truth is, if we keep having this conversation back and forth, and we do not provide an opportunity for our boys and girls to lead and then be part of conversations that shaping the future, then we cannot really achieve what we're looking for in trying to to integrate gender into education. So for us at I Read, we're passionate about identifying young people at a very tender age. We're trying to make them part of global conversations, and then we're trying to make them not just being part of it, they should lead conversations that will shaping their interest in advocating for a gender-balanced community. And lastly, the issue of gender to us at I Read is something in which we do not joke with. We cannot continually focus on the girls' aspect and then leaving the boys to suffer. Because the truth is, if we continue to focus on the girls' aspects, some boys are going through, traumatic experience. Some are being depressed. Some are finding it very difficult to even have access to basic amenities in the various schools. So for us at I Read, we champion gender equality that is devoid of bias. If you're a girl child, you're a boy child, you must have access to the same thing in which your colleagues in which have access to. So for us, yes, we take cognizance of the boys and girls, and then we try to ensure that in our empowerment for both the girl child and the boy child, we are very fair, and then we're very conscious of the fact that these boys and girls return to the same community, they return to the same environment, they go to the same schools, the same churches, the same mosques, the same marketplace, and so we try to instill in their air, like, you must respect the other gender, regardless of where you find yourself or how blessed or how favorable you are. You must try as much as possible to understand that every gender must be respected. And lastly, there's this stereotype perception about the boy child in Nigeria, that yes, or let me say in Africa, the boy child can fix himself, the boy child is matured enough, the boy child can take care of himself, and the boy child is seen as the all Messiah. No, we should not deliberately sideline the boy child. As we continue to focus on ensuring that, yes, girls are given equal representation on the table, we should also ensure that we take into cognizance the boy child and the girl child. Because if we continually just focus on the girl child, we will not achieve, yes, we might achieve a bit of what we have. But then if we do not work together as a whole, then I think we might not achieve what. So in conclusion, for us at iRead, yes, we've leveraged on some of the E4J tools. We've tried to instill the culture of integrity, the culture of honesty, the culture of lawfulness, and the respect for the rule of law. And lastly, we are of the opinion that both the boys and girls must be given equal representation, equal opportunities to champion their individual goals. And then in doing that, we are going to have a fair, equitable, and honest world where the rights of all citizens will be respected and protected. Thank you.
Jacob, thank you so much. Thank you for telling us about your comprehensive approach. And I very much liked how you're stressing that it's important to really keep a balance. So don't forget the boys when we talk about gender, and that we need to empower both. And I very much also appreciated when you shared with us what you're doing to ensure that children and youth are part of the global discussions, and moreover start leading global discussions, because this is exactly what education is for justice is about. We want to empower, together with you, our Education for Justice champions. We want to empower the next generation. Now, Jacob, a tricky question for you. What is your biggest fear? What could happen if we don't empower the next generation to become gender champions? What do you see? What can happen? How would this have a negative impact on our world? What is your greatest fear on that?
Thank you, Bianca. That question gives me a lot of concern, and I'll just put it in the right perspective. My greatest fear is that if we do not integrate gender perspectives into what we do, we're going to have a society that is gender insensitive. What do I mean by that? We're going to have a community whereby you have a gender trying to be superior over the other. Like I said in my opening remarks, human rights is for both the boys and the girls. And let me take like a critical look at the situation in which you have in some parts of Nigeria. Because of this societal issue that the girl child should not go to school, we've seen situations whereby we have young girls who have been married off. Some have gotten pregnant at a tender age. Some have been adopted by Boko Haram. Some have been turned into street hawkers. Some have been you find all of these social misfits, or societal misfits happening. That's for the girl child. And then for the boy child, we find a young boy who is within the age of 7 and 10, takes into drug, becomes a drug addict, becomes a rapist. So that's my fear, that if we continue to neglect gender, we're going to have a society where people will be seen as puppets in the hands of others. So for me, I think what we can do in this aspect is to ensure that we advocate for gender equity. Look at the issues happening now in Nigeria. If you go to the streets of the north, you find a very young girl at the age of 16 or 17 being married out. And this is because people do not really pay attention to education. the only way in which you can liberate Africa or the world is to invest in education. Today, we have the Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala of the World Bank today, the WTO today, because our parents understood the value of education. If she had lived in a world that only paid attention to the male child, we would not have a female DG of WTO today. So my major fear is that if we continue to neglect a particular gender, we're going to have a stereotype environment where one gender will feel superior to the other. And for us to address this issue of superiority, we must ensure that we invest deliberately in education. Governments at the federal, state, regional, and local level must be deliberate in ensuring that the issue of education, particularly the girl child and the male child, must be on the front burner. We have several issues of security crisis back and forth in Nigeria today, particularly in the northeastern part. And this is because young girls, young boys have been adopted. And it's because they do not even know the value of education. So like I keep saying it, the major fear in which I have is having a community or a world that is stereotyped, where one gender believes that I am superior to this. And for me, I would go back to say that if we as young people do not begin to lead, if you don't put us as young people on conversations that will shape the future of gender conversations, then how then can we achieve this? So in closing, I'll say this in perspective. We as young people, or you people who are our leaders and mothers, yes, you should endeavor to create conversations for us as young people so that we can champion and have a society that takes cognizance of gender perspectives, the rule of law, and all of this. I can assure you that before 2030, we're going to have a prosperous world.
Thank you, Jacob.
That respects the right of girls
what you
and the
fear
boy
and
child.
also sharing your vision, how we can overcome that. Rima, now over to you. Having heard now from Melissa, having heard now from Jacob, can you share with us what is your biggest fear? What do you think would happen if we don't invest in the next generation to become gender champions? Rima, over to you.
As I mentioned, from early stages. And my biggest fear that we still have this kind of gap between the men and women, especially in the STEM education, because everywhere women are left behind to lead or to go to the schools, or even she cannot have the power as men have. We are not asking to be in very competitive between men and women. What we ask just and gender equality from early age, and to change the stereotype of every culture. Because here in the MENA region, the culture of the stereotype, it is we have this kind of resistance to change it and to resistant to do something new. But what I think that we have to work hard on the curriculum and to change the curriculum for the education, and how to bring more role model in the education and the STEM education. What we are for myself, that my biggest fear is how to build your digital identity, because now all of us have this kind of digital identity. I saw many of kids. I see many of kids that using this kind of smartphone, this kind of platforms, without this kind of maturity to use it as a digital identity. Now you can find that someone that refused from his job, or refused from immigration, or he cannot apply for a university because he has or he has a bad tweet, or has some resistance of using the platform. So we need to build more and to highlight more about how to build this generation for the digital identity, because now your digital identity is very important to use it as a unique one, how to shape it, and how to build your brand in the digital identity. This is what we are focusing in Galaxy when we went to the schools and to raising awareness about the cyber security for women, especially, and the girls, how to make this kind of cyber to be safe for them, and how to make them more powerful to use their words if someone abused them through the internet, how to make it more applicable to their families and to their culture to adopt this kind of claims. We need, my biggest fear that we need that this kind of gap even for the laws and policies, because everywhere the technology is booming, but there is no booming in the law and the especially in the laws and the policy and the regulation. It is all the same mentality, and it is taking time. And this kind of time, it's not, and really, it's taking time to change the policy or to change the laws in the region. So, but the technology is booming. So we need to find this kind to fill the gap. This is the first thing, to build the skills for the woman, and how to build the generation with a digital identity in a safe way, and how to understand this kind of digital cyber to be safe for our kids. Because our kids, when I saw the young generation, they use this and use this. There is no efficient way to use the internet. This is my biggest fear from my side, and how to make more track and more to push more about the rules and policy to be aligned with the booming of the technology.
Thank you, Rima, also for highlighting a concern that I think many of us have with regard to cybercrime, because let's face it, cybercrime affects men and women, but we also talk about gender particular cybercrime. And yes, I agree with you. We need to educate children and youth much more on the opportunities that are out there, but also on the risk. And this is also why I just want to mention that under Education for Justice, we're working at all three levels, primary, secondary, and tertiary level, to really empower the teachers to talk more about opportunities, but also about the risk. And this has been a very good lesson for all of us. We have received so much feedback from teachers saying similar what you have said, Rima. We need to empower them that they understand, how they present themselves in the digital world. So thank you so much for flagging that. I share with you that this is a risk that we are facing, and that we really need to also put a gender lens on the different kind of risk that the youth are facing there. With this, Melissa, now, I know it's tough now. You have heard what Rima and Jacob, what they are fearing, and the biggest risk that they see for the future, what would happen if we don't empower the next generation to become gender sensitive. Melissa, would you like to add on that, please?
I would. So my biggest fear is that if we don't fail to progress gender equality, we will fail to progress the SDGs. And then as a global community, we're going to backslide, and it will actually be a security issue. For women, at least, so much research and so many historical examples show that when societies start to get nervous or fearful or experience a bit of instability, one of the first things to happen is that women's rights get rolled back. And this is usually for protective purposes. It can be as simple as the terrorist attack, and then all of a sudden the families are too afraid to send girls to school. And unfortunately, because of COVID and other global events, we are starting to see countries take isolationist, nationalistic, populist stances, and we can feel global nervousness about the future. And what we are watching is this global exodus of women from the workforce as a result. And this is our insecurity in industries and sectors where women were already a minority, and we already needed more. And given what we know about the women, peace, and security agenda, that's that women's involvement at all levels of peace and security decision-making is essential for stability and prosperity, this is very dangerous. Because I am a teacher, I'm going to give you some stuff to study, guys. Sorry, but I'm going to name drop. There's incredible empirical research by Mary Caprioli and Valerie Hudson in the United States, and many, many others, that demonstrate the physical safety of women within a state is a better predictor of that state's peacefulness than the state's level of democracy, wealth, or its religious identity, that the inclusion of women in peace negotiations significantly increases the durability and sustainability of peace, that women's domestic equality within a state correlates with lower levels of international militarism, lower levels of aggression in intrastate disputes, and a lower likelihood of a state resorting to force as a first response. I mean, we need women, but still somehow what we're hearing now with this nervousness are still traditional security arguments and traditional security issues. And we're just not hearing the amount of conversations we need about the significant growing security issue that is the lack of women, that is getting made worse by the exit of women, and how this is going to affect us. It's just a tiny policy and advocacy community that's talking about it. It's not a big thing. It's not as big as we need it to be. So this is why we need youth to understand gender. We need their brains, we need their voices, and we need their numbers, and we need their unique ability for collective action. And we need to engage them and teach them and empower them to get them to understand the security issue. And it can't just be the keen ones. It can't just be the youth who already believe in gender equality or women, peace, and security. We need to be able to do this in education by reaching the ones who don't even view gender equality as an issue. And they definitely view it, if they're going to view it as an issue at all, they're going to be like, maybe this is a fairness thing, not a security thing. So that is that's my part of what I'm fearful of, that it's a security issue that's going unaddressed, and we need to talk about that.
Thank you, Melissa. I have to say, the three of you gave me now a lot of things to think about, a lot of food for thought, and I would like to invite now the listeners of our workshop, the participants of our workshop, to ask you questions via the chat. So please write your question in the chat. And as soon as we have a question there, we will start a Q&A. But I would start the Q&A now with a question to Melissa. Melissa, you have talked a lot about, I recall what you said, being the only woman in the faculty. And thus, I would like to ask you, what has been the response of your institutions? What have been the response of your community to your work? But also, what do you think is the biggest hurdle holding back gender-sensitive education in the community, in your community right now?
The biggest hurdle for sure is fear of scandal, fear of community repercussion. People are scared and of developing a bad reputation by being labeled a feminist, because there's just so much false information or misunderstood information about especially things like halal feminism. The response out here of my institution has been one of a conservative nervousness, but the response by the community and my students has been extremely positive. So my institutions, they want to support me, but again, I work at a conservative law college, right? And many of my colleagues have studied Sharia law and are coming from Sharia perspectives. So I'm not trying to be radical or anything, but I'm coming from the US and I'm coming from a very different perspective than what they've been taught and what I've been taught. And my college is very conservative. So generally I found that they're not going to stop me. They're not going to hold me back. But at the same time, they're probably not going to support me at that exact moment. But once I do the event, it goes well. All the students, all the parents, everyone is happy. Then my college is very happy to then promote it after it's done, and woof, no scandal there, and life is good. There's not a tweet storm coming back at us. But they're afraid to take first actions, and I can say not to upset them, but I wrote an article about women, peace, and security, and incorporating the media in Qatar, and I've presented it at multiple times out here. It was accepted by my college's law journal for publication. It went through peer review. It got accepted, and on the very last stage, I got all these acceptance letters. Like the night before publication, I got an email saying that, and I'll tell you the quote, some passages aren't compatible with local values and traditions. So women, so there's this fear, once it's out there and it's published, they're afraid to take the first step. There's a fear of backlash that is real, and that nobody wants to end up a scandal. But once it's out there and it's published in another journal, they'll be happy to advertise it for me, if that makes sense. But the students, the youth, they're less afraid. They're brave, and I don't see the community, and there are more of them, to be honest. And them as a group, the students and their sisters and their families, I don't see when the community, that they seem to support it. It just seems to be a bit of fear of repercussions is what's holding us back at my institution.
Thank you, Melissa. So I see your struggle, and I see that there needs to be much more to be done also on the advocacy side, so that also the different levels and the different institutions understand what they can win if they adopt a better gender-sensitive approach. There is now one question in the chat, and I think, Melissa, this is a question mostly for you. Can I read out the question? It's from Helena. Hello, Helena. Thanks for being part of today's session. And the question is the following. For those of us who are teachers, any suggestions of how to investigate our own practices, again comparing gender distribution of grades? Melissa, would you like to answer the question?
Sure, for sure. Yes. So actually, there's a fabulous Harvard Business School case study. They did an internal reflection. So I'm trying to remember the date, but I don't remember. But look up Harvard Business School case study. And Harvard, they thought that they had been doing a great job at gender equality. And then they did this self-study, and they discovered that they were not, and they had significant changes to make. They put not proctors, what is it? They put transcribers in the classroom so that professors could get an actual transcript after each lecture, so that they could then grade participation based on the transcript instead of what they remember, because they found that actually the men were quickly, raising their hands, and the women were maybe holding back. And until they actually, or the men made more bombastic or, audacious comments that were memorable, and the female students did not. So they put in these transcripts, these transcribers. Also, so finding a more equitable way to judge participation in your classroom. Also anonymous grading, right? If you can do it, do anonymous grading. They also actually had a person that they put in, they had their TA, in the classroom just designed to stop interrupting. So they found that some students, typically male students, would talk over the female students in the classrooms, or even the male professors would talk over or interrupt their female students. So they put a person in the room to be the don't interrupt, let everyone finish. And what Harvard found is when they made these changes, and they made more changes than that, they increased their female faculty, they increased their female retention rate, and they didn't have all these women dropping out and going to other fabulous schools and leaving their college. So there's that. And then just also, I feel like there's an awareness, if you just take a moment to be aware and reflect every time that you're grading or every time that you're speaking, that can also help you. But I'm sure there are other colleagues that can maybe also help answer that.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much. And thank you, Helena, for this fantastic question. Jacob, Rima, do you also want to add on this from your experience?
Yes. Actually, Actually, Dr. Melissa, everything she covered. But I think what we need more that to enhance the teacher skills even more, to be adapted the technology more. Here in Galaxy, we have this kind of educational interactive tools that can be done between the teachers and between the student. This is what we are talking about, that when you have this kind of interactive sessions between the content that you have delivered to the student, it will be more important. So today I bring for you Nijam. It is like a star. So star, it is a robot, educational robot that made with the AI. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so once you put something like this for the teachers and for the student, it will be an interactive session. It is more important to have this kind of it's not a luxury, but it is a needs for all the students to have this kind of AI, artificial intelligence skills to be more. And the other thing that I think that we have it here in what is it? The virtual reality that we use it even more to teach the skills for our student, and this is mainly made by our Galaxy, that we have to enhance this kind of future skills to be prepared for the future jobs. This is mainly what I need to highlight it. Thank you very much. I don't know if Jacob will add.
Thank you very much. Jacob, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, my comments will be from the perspective as a non-professional educator. I'll just tell for teachers who want to challenge the status quo, be hungry for knowledge, go beyond the usual calendar you have or the usual limit you have, seek for knowledge, be thirsty, and go after it aggressively. Dr. Melissa is doing quite well in Qatar. I looked up a profile, and also Dr. Rima. You all are doing so fantastically well, and it's a pleasure to see that you both are females and already doctors, in like leaders in your professional career. So for the teachers who are asking, look at these two women as your mentor. Send them emails, request to be their mentees. They have gone through the process in which you want to go through. If Dr. Melissa and Dr. Rima can do it, every other teacher can do it, regardless of where you find yourself. So that would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And again, thank you, Helena, for asking, for posing this really important question. I think it also shows that each of us, Melissa, I'll go back to you in a second. It also shows that each of us, we constantly need also to question our own perspectives, our own attitudes. And I think self-reflection is a big thing when it comes to assess our action. Melissa, you want to add something?
I did. I also wanted to give you one more study. It's also important to have the students recognize their bias too. So there's a ratemyprofessor.com study. I forget who did it, but they looked at gendered evaluations of professors. And they found that female and male professors are rated differently in their annual evaluations by their students based on nothing really other than gender. And I replicated that in Qatar, and I looked at I only had time for 230, but it also happened in Qatar. So I also think when you're talking about evaluating your bias within the classroom or checking yourself, I think it's also important to have your students check it and make them aware of it too. Because as a female professor, as a female lecturer and educator, you are judged differently as well. That's it.
Thank you. And thank you. I know this study. I've seen that before in one of the workshops that we did together. Thank you so much for mentioning it, because this is also a very revealing study. And now, dear colleagues, I have one final question from the chat, and I think it goes best to Jacob. Jacob, the question is, what can the government, the political parties, and civil societies do to create an enabling environment for integrating gender balance? Try to be very short. What's the number one thing that the government, political parties, and or civil societies can do to create an enabling environment?
Good, thank you. I think the first thing government can do is to have a gender-friendly policy. The policy should not just be towards the male, it should be all-encompassing. Secondly, the females should also strive to be a part of the conversation. Females, it's enough time for you to be at the driver's seat, not just behind. Be at the driver's seat, get on the wheel, and then lead advocacies and lend your voice. Today, we have Dr. Ugoji Okonjo-Iweala as the DG of WTO. We can have several others, Okonjo-Iweala heading the UN, the UNODC, and every other international organization in which we have around the world. So women, stand up and fight for your rights. Thank you.
What nice closing words. Rima, would you like to add on that? What can the government do? What can political parties do? And what can civil society do? Just one sentence.
Okay. Actually, we have to partner. I'm always calling all this kind of collaboration and partnership between the civil society, between even the people, even for the government. It is like a triangle. We have to collaborate more to enhance our policy and laws, to change the stereotype, to build and raising awareness about the gender equality from young age and from primary schools, to adapt this kind of perspective, to change it for the culture adaptation. But what we have it from our government, it is what we can to enhance our policies, laws, and regulation to be aligned with the technology needs, to be aligned with our this kind of environmental changing. This is what we are asking, to involve women in the leadership roles more. For myself, all the time I have been as official delegated with our king our King Abdullah. So all the time I'm the only lady, all the time. So involve more women in this kind of delegation, in this kind of role model, in this kind of C-level position. It is really important. But this is coming from how to build these ladies to be in this position from young age, to build this kind of stereotype for ladies, to highlight this kind of role models. This is what we are asking for. This is enough for me.
Thank you so much, Rima. Thank you. I fully agree on you. Sit at the table. We need to push the women, the female, the young girls, and the gender sensitive voice to sit at the table. Melissa, do you want to add something on this final question?
Yes. I would say gender must be systematically incorporated into research and coursework at all educational levels, but especially at the university and the tertiary and university level. And gender should not be something that is viewed as needing to be incorporated into syllabi or research or projects by ambitious or innovative individual instructors. This needs to be, gender must be incorporated as part of a university's institutional strategy, as part of a state strategy, but it must be strategic. It cannot just be up to all of us at an individual level.
Thank you, Melissa. Dear panelists, thank you so much for this inspiring discussion on the International Women's Day. The three of you have inspired me, and I'm sure you have also inspired our participants today. It was a great discussion, and I don't have much to recap because you have mentioned what I had in my mind to mention, but I want to summarize it with one term. Several of you have said fill the gap in different terms. What we need to do is to fill the gap. First, when it comes to education, because education is key. We need to empower the next generation. We need, as Jacob has said, we need to empower them. They need to read, they need to learn, to understand their rights, and also to know their duties. We need to include what Melissa said, gender in a strategic way, in particular, at the primary, at the secondary, but also at the tertiary. Because let's not forget, what the children and students here at the university level and in school, this makes a difference. And we also need to ensure that gender perspectives are integrated in these different school curricula. Fill the gap also relates to the need of role models. And I think today, the panelists here today, they are amazing role models, but we need more of you. We need more role models out there that inspire the young ones, that there are different ways to think about career, and there are different ways to go about life. So thank you so much, dear panelists, for having been fantastic role models and for having inspired me today. Fill the Gap also relates to advocacy, and Jacob has been very outspoken on that. We need to do advocacy. We need to make the governments, the parties, and also Melissa has said it, and Rima, we need them to understand why gender matters and why it's a win-win for all of us if we adopt gender-sensitive and gender perspectives in education, especially when we educate on rule of law. And finally, we need to set up we need to fill the gap in a way that we need to set up strategic strategies. The United Nations, as you all know, is strongly advocating for gender equality. And I'm happy to say that especially the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime is ensuring that there's mainstreaming gender perspectives into all our activities. Thank you again, participants, for having joined us today. Thank you again, panelists, for your amazing food for thought that will help us not only today on the day of the on the International Women's Day, but also tomorrow and next year, to make sure that we not forget the importance of including gender in education, especially when we educate on rule of law, ethics, and integrity. With this, a goodbye, good evening from Vienna. Have a lovely day, and let's inspire change together.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.